Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a blueberry yogurt cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake is moist and it's flavorful. It's full of fresh blueberries, and then on top we're going to put a brown sugar streusel. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need an 8-inch spring-form pan, that's 20 centimeters. It has two parts, you have that, and then you clamp on, wrong way, clamp on like that. And this one has 3-inch, it's 3-inch deep, 7.5 centimeters. Now you could butter the inside of your pan, or today I'm just going to spray it with one of these non-stick sprays. So, and then I like to put just a round of parchment on the bottom of the pan just to make sure it doesn't stick. Okay, so a lot of things going on here. It's not a hard cake to make. I'm making it by hand. You could use a hand mixer or a stand mixer, but it's so easy to put together. I'm just doing it by hand. We're going to start with our streusel. In a small bowl, I have just 1/4 cup, 35 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. To that, I'm adding 1/4 cup, 55 grams of light brown sugar. If you're measuring with, they always say it's best to measure out your ingredients with a scale, but if you're using measuring cups, when you measure brown sugar, just make sure you pat it down. And then 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Love cinnamon in my streusel. And then I'm just going to mix that together. And then we will add 3 tablespoons, which is 42 grams of butter. You can use salted, unsalted, whatever you have. Have it pretty soft because we're just going to work it into our flour mixture here. So you can see mine's really soft. And I'm actually just going to work it in with my hands until we have coarse crumbs. Okay, so finished. I did wash my hands. They're pretty mucky. So that's what you're looking for, just coarse crumbs. So that's done. Now for our yogurt cake batter. 2 bowls, one for the wet, one for the dry. We'll start with the dry. 1.5 cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour. And what I'm going to do, you will need also 1.5 cups, which is 225 grams of fresh blueberries. Now, when you get your blueberries, make sure you wash them. If there's any stems attached to the blueberries, remove those, wash them, kind of go through them and pick out any like soft or mushy ones. Now the biggest problem when you use something like blueberries in a cake batter is sometimes they fall to the bottom. Sometimes you can't help that happening because the blueberries are heavier than the batter, so they just fall. But we can kind of try to prevent that by taking a little bit of our flour. I'm just taking like a large spoonful and tossing our blueberries. And sometimes, I'm going to take a little more. If you do that, it helps prevent them from falling to the bottom. But you know, it doesn't really bother me if that happens. You still get to taste them in the cake. So let's put that aside. And then what we're going to add to our flour, 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. I like to use the kosher salt. And whisk that. That's the dry. And for the wet, I have 2 large eggs. Have your eggs at room temperature. 2 large is about 110 grams out of the shell. So whisk that. To that, I like a little vanilla. So I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. It's for flavoring. If you don't want vanilla, you can leave that out. You can maybe add a little bit of pure almond extract if you would prefer that flavor. And then I'm going to add a half a cup, 120 milliliters, 120 grams of a flavorless oil, you know, vegetable, corn, canola. Whisk that in. Or you could even use a light olive oil. And then, of course, we need our yogurt. 3/4 of a cup, which is 180 grams of, now you can use, I'm using a full fat yogurt. The Greek styles I really like to use. Have your yogurt at room temperature. But you know, if you don't, if you only have like a reduced fat, you could do that. But just make sure when you bring it to room temperature, you might find there's some liquid. Just drain that off if you're using the reduced fat. Put that. It's a nice flavor, the yogurt, plus a really moist texture along with that using oil. And the good thing about using oil in a cake batter is we can refrigerate the cake and it doesn't get really hard like when you use butter. And the last, once I get this, is I'm going to add 1 cup, 200 grams of granulated white sugar. May seem like a lot, but remember we're using a plain yogurt, which is, you know, a little sour. Use some sugar, sweeten that up. Okay, so we have our wet and we have our dry. I'm going to, as you can see, this is not a difficult batter to make. You know what the hard part is? Washing all the dishes. That's the part. If you have a dishwasher, somebody that wouldn't mind doing those dirty dishes for you, that'd be nice. So I'm just using a spatula to mix that together. And then once it's almost mixed, then I'm going to add all of my, if you've ever made a blueberry buckle, this is kind of a different take on a blueberry buckle. Same kind of, you've got a cake, you've got blueberries, and you got the streusel topping. That's where I got the idea. I love blueberry buckle, but I love the yogurt cake, so I thought, why not kind of bring the two together? Okay, that's that. Move all my dirty dishes to the side. Now my pan, springform pan, has like a little lip there. If yours doesn't, then what you want to do is put your springform pan on a larger baking sheet just in case, because sometimes springform pans can leak a little, so you want to make sure you don't want that to leak on the bottom of your oven. Then you got to clean your oven. We don't want that. So just put on a larger baking sheet. So just put batter. And could you make this without the streusel topping? Yes, you could. But try it. It's wonderful. And the other thing, could you use frozen blueberries? Yes, you could. And I would not defrost my berries before I add them to the batter, because I find if you defrost the frozen, they get really soft and then they tend to bleed into the batter, into the cake batter. So I just leave them frozen. The only difference will be, you know, it might take a few minutes longer for your cake to bake. So you could make this an off-season blueberries. Okay. And then, swipe my hand, then we got our streusel. I'm going to do a plug for the Georgia farmers. I did manage to get some fresh Georgia blueberries for this cake. They are so good. I know we are known as a peach state, but we also grow blueberries, and they are very good. So just sprinkle it evenly over the top. And as this bakes, you know, your streusel's going to melt and it'll do a solid layer over the top. Okay, let's make sure you got all of that. So now everyone's oven is a little different, but I'm going to say 50 to 55 minutes for this cake. It'll rise, it'll turn a beautiful golden brown. And when you take a toothpick, a wooden toothpick, insert it into the center, it will come out clean. I do like to rotate my cake pan front to back about halfway through baking, just because you can have hot spots in your oven, so it gets more even if you move your pan around. So 50 to 55 minutes. Okay, so our blueberry yogurt cake is done. So put your pan on a wire rack. Isn't that gorgeous? I love beautiful golden brown. And if you put a toothpick into the center, it will come out clean. And you'll also, when your cake is done, it's just starting to pull away from the sides of the pan. That's another way you can tell. So now, we're going to let this cool down to room temperature before I cut a slice. I find after about 10-15 minutes, what I do is take an offset spatula or knife and just run it around the inside to make sure it's not sticking. And then I just undo the clamp here and then just let it finish cooling. So when we come back, we will try a slice. So I let the cake cool down to room temperature. Now we are ready to cut a slice. So sharp knife. Okay. There we go. Isn't that nice? I like the contrast between that golden brown crust and then the white or kind of yellowy white cake batter in there. And then of course blueberries. Now some, if you can see, some did fall. The large ones that were really heavy, but overall I'm happy with that. So let's try it. That is a very flavorful cake. It's wonderfully soft and moist because of the yogurt and the oil. And then of course, you contrast that really nice, soft, moist, little vanilla flavored cake with the fresh blueberries, a little tart and tangy. And then of course, I love the streusel on top. It's kind of crisp. And you got the brown sugar and the cinnamon. Overall, a really good, I would call it a snacking cake. It is good warm. It is good at room temperature, or it's even good cold. Because I do recommend refrigerating the leftovers. Like the first day, you can leave it out. But then if you have leftovers, I would store them in the fridge because the blueberries, if you leave it out, the blueberries will really soften the cake too much. So it'll last longer if you store it in the fridge. And actually, I like it cold, I must say. So you must make this one. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.